my name is Pete Saronis, and I am super excited to host another Thought Leadership Consortium dialogue and information exchange with amazing people, thought leaders, human beings who are passionate and purposeful in what they do each and every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Today, we're going to talk about collaboration, partnership, innovation, spanning our national laboratories, the critical infrastructure sectors, the research and development domain. So those of you inside the Beltway and those of you outside the Beltway, we hope you come away today educated, informed, and enlightened by these individuals, and hopefully will not only Google them and find out how awesome they are and their pedigrees, and also where they've gone to school and who they are and this sort of thing, but understand what it is their companies and organizations stand for, as we today in this country are very focused on the very infrastructure we depend on every day. Themes of today will include the air, the water, the roads, the grid. We'll talk cybersecurity. We're going to talk maybe even some rare earth element activity from Dr. Rose out in Albany, Oregon. We hope you come away with a sense of, should you ever have a chance to meet these incredible human beings, you'll know what to talk to them about because what they care about. Okay? This is about sharing, and then maybe one day doing some seeking and solving. I worked in government for 25 years. I've been on for my own. I run this company that truly is just that. Whatever I can do to connect dots, build bridges, and create a dialogue that matters, it warms my heart. And I did have a good time in government. I may go back. And today we're going to really focus on that really, really, really important theme of open government. Be transparent, collaborative, and participatory. So we're going to start with, ladies first, Dr. Kelly Rose at the National Energy Technology Lab, one of 17 in our country. I'm going to ask each of my guests to introduce them and talk a little bit at a high enough level of what it is you do, why it matters to you, and the amazing organization you work in. Dr. Rose.
Hi, it's nice to see everybody virtually today. I've been a researcher at, as Pete said, the National Energy Technology Lab for almost 20 years, and hard to believe it's been that long, but it's an evolutionary journey. The National Labs, I didn't know this when I joined, but I've come to appreciate the opportunity they offer. They are the think tank for our nation. That's where our scientists and our engineers who are dedicated to public service come together with support personnel and other technical innovators in the IT, cyber, and other spaces to think about the problems that our country is facing and our world are facing now and into the future. And we have the opportunity to work on those innovative solutions. So I started off here as a geologist working on resource assessments to address energy demand related challenges of our nation. I'm still involved in those types of things. I have an amazing opportunity to mentor and lead a research team here at NETL. But I've also, for the last almost 14 years, been involved in development of a piece of critical infrastructure that is crescendoing in importance globally. The Energy Data Exchange is a data infrastructure capability we've been building out to curate, coordinate, and enable virtual collaboration responsibly, securely, and appropriately for the nation's energy, environmental, and societal data needs. And there's a whole team here that's involved in that. So my research spans a lot of different things. Pete foreshadowed some of the rare earth critical mineral, energy, water, EJSJ, but that's part of being a national lab researcher. And that's really the journey I've been on for 20 years here since I left the private sector.
Well, Kelly, thank you. And there's so much to that, folks, but enough was dropped at least. And I take notes a lot of the time. So when I hear things that just want to be punctuated, I will. Evolutionary journey, that's the life that everybody in government, and I know Scott and Charlie, you live it every day. You don't stop. There's always something happening in the market in the world. We just had a substation in Carolina shot down, which impacted. We had Colonial, we had Katrina, we have physical and natural disasters. The labs are think tanks for our nation, no doubt. And I love that you are at your heart of hearts, or in your heart of hearts, you are a geologist by trade, but you know a lot of stuff from the study of rocks. And I love her stories. I told Kelly my favorite book growing up was Peter and the Rock. So EDX we'll jump into. Kelly, thanks for a little bit of that spoiler alert. EDX is an amazing platform that we're going to come away today with, hoping everybody watching will Google it and go, oh my gosh, I didn't know it existed. let's segue to Mr. Scott Barr, who is leading support for and strategic efforts regarding EDX, but a little bit about you, Scott, and that purpose passion discussion.
Great. And Pete, thanks for having me. And it's quite humbling to be talking with two very prestigious experts. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Pete, I lead the technology consulting services business at Maximus. The path how I got here is interesting. I was a partner at one of our largest consulting firms, supporting the federal government for 20 plus years. While I was there, I had chances to not only lead major parts of a business, but I also had roles in the leadership around Chief Transformation Officer of the 30,000 person company. I led the consulting functional service offering that was roughly 7,000 folks. And after 20 some years, I said, gosh, let me try my hand at something smaller. So I went to be president of a healthcare technology company that was really supporting the VA, and then, got a call after a year or two there to come drive the technology business across Maximus, where I've been for the past year. And I can tell you, I have never been part of an organization that is more client-focused, that is totally oriented around innovation for our clients, but innovation that drives the world forward. And I think that is so relevant to the conversation we'll have today. In addition to my day job, part of my functional expertise is around change management, IT transformation. I've been an adjunct professor at Georgetown University for about 8 years. And then the last sort of pillar about Scott that folks may not know, throughout my career, I've had the privilege and honor of working in and around the VA and in our defense community, but never had the honor to serve in uniform myself. And so about a decade ago, almost, I was asked to get involved, and now I serve on the board and executive committee for the USO Metro, which is a great opportunity to provide to those who are protecting our nation, to help create programs for the service members and their families. And I just, again, I am super excited to be part of this conversation. What we're talking about today is just gotten bolstered with all the legislation, and I know we're going to talk about it, that's come up. But I think we have an opportunity in front of us to change the world, and to drive technology, to drive research with EDX and other things. And I think today's conversation will be just a springboard for more on that topic. So
wonderfully stated, and what a segue, not even scripted, because Charlie, with all the promise of innovation and research and development, you're going to paint your picture of there's still risk, and we'll get into that in 1 second. I just want to thank Scott for that introduction. What I love about these is everybody watching, these folks are our parents, our daughters, our husbands, our individuals that have lives outside of work. So, getting to know people through this lens, I find to be awfully interesting and compelling. And I'll always learn something new, even though I know Scott, Charlie, and Kelly very well. Scott, thank you for your support for mission for our military and defense. I won't hold Georgetown against you. I'm a Villanova grad, Big East.
I knew that was
1985, brother. We took you down, but I grew up a Georgetown fan, believe it or not. I will echo to anyone that this client-focused, mission-driven, how we can leverage technology is something that is laced throughout Scott Barr. And again, when I met him, I could tell right away. So thank you for joining us, Scott. And we'll get into some other great stuff going on in the world of Maximus. Charlie Harry, Dr. Charlie Harry, why don't you take that that has been addressed already and tie it into the world of cyber and security, and also give folks a little bit of background on your incredible tapestry of wisdom.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Pete, and really excited to have this conversation with Scott and Kelly. Thank you again for having me. So my background, as you will know, Pete, but others, obviously don't. I come from kind of the security community, the security world. I spent the vast majority of my career in the intelligence community and within the Department of Defense, with a focus on cybersecurity. And effectively playing offense for the country for most of those years. I came to the University of Maryland, so I've got to give a little bit of a hard time to Scott for being over at Georgetown instead of the University of Maryland. But
We'll get me there.
exactly. I figured that might be your next statement. But I came to the University of Maryland primarily because in all my time that I spent in government, I noticed that there was kind of a missing language centered around strategic consequence and effect. And it was an area that if you're interested about how technology supports society, how we're going to undertake this incredible transformation that we're on the path towards, how do you make sure that we actually get to take advantage of all the beneficial aspects of technology and minimize the consequences, right? And so this idea of risk management is incredibly important, and especially when we talk about the threats coming from cyber. So a lot of the work I do at the university is primarily focused around working with companies, working with governments on trying to assess strategic risk, being able to help them by providing tools to better allocate resources. Because for all of our technical knowledge that we have, we oftentimes have this problem with our human organizations. What are the best places to spend money to protect ourselves so that we can minimize the most consequential attacks on our systems, specifically areas of critical infrastructure like the power grid, like water systems, like transport systems. And so my passion in this space is how do you start to weave together this complex tapestry of technology and humans in such a way that we understand where those most consequential risks lie and where should we spend our monies to better mitigate them. So I'm really, again, excited to have this conversation. And as we talk about the new infrastructure law that we've seen pass, I'm really excited to talk about how cyber kind of fits into that broader conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Charlie. And again, we're gonna pivot into that. And I think we've introduced that this is not stuff that is written and here's what this means, and that's all you need to know. It's assimilating, it's aggregating, it's collecting, and I'm going to use some of Kelly's words, curating all this information coming at us today. When the internet was born, we didn't know much about security and cyber and all that. We learned over time that it's something that we have to be continuously monitoring, right? Just like R&D is continuously being done. And I can only imagine in your world, Scott, with the Beltway and so many folks out there. I don't want to use the word competitors, but businesses saying, I can solve your problems, I can solve your problems. The homework is in, well, what problem do they have when it comes to cybersecurity at that agency and that program, working with a lab? And I know that you are doing that, and it takes that kind of distillation. So to set context, we're going to move into this bipartisan infrastructure law focus. But what does it stand for? $1.2 trillion being pumped into the economy, going out in the form of grants, and it's real money. We all know that, it's on the news. We have a crumbling infrastructure. I recall when President Biden visited Pittsburgh, Kelly, a bridge collapsed, ironically, and it was there to celebrate, the investment in our nation. It's like, oh my gosh, did this really happen? But things are happening all the time. And I go back to Flint, Michigan. I go back to Superstorm Sandy. I go to Katrina, Deepwater Horizon. Things happen, and we have to figure out how to fix it. It takes a village. So when I think of EDX, since you brought it up, that to me epitomizes something that was already in flight, but now has got this focus on it because its ability to find, connect, curate, use, reuse data. I almost have it memorized to advance. Fossil energy, environmental, and innovative R&D doesn't even do it justice. It does so much more. Can you talk about the impact, and this is going to be for Scott and Charlie, of course, how it's impacting your methods for supporting customers and clients, but in Kelly, your case, how has it really informed the evolution of the EDX?
Yeah, I mean, the two fundamental bills that you brought up, BIL and IRA, they're ways for our society to move forward. we're always moving, we're always evolving. That's kind of the conundrum of the human existence. We're constantly changing, but we kind of like the way things were, but we want things to evolve. And we keep innovating and we keep building things. And when we build things, we're part of this ecosystem that is our planet, whether it's virtual in the data infrastructure realm, like the Energy Data Exchange, EDX is, or it's physical infrastructure like bridges and wells and power plants, generating stations. They're all part of this ecosystem. We're part of the ecosystem. And IRA and BIL are part of being responsible about the past of our infrastructure and pushing into the future. Modernizing, evolving, continuing with that change and that journey. EDX, yes, we started building EDX 14 years ago, 13 years ago. I was working on a really small data warehousing project in my research team because we were just getting overwhelmed at that point with data. And today it would look like a drop in the bucket. And my boss at the time came back from being on the Deepwater Horizon response team, dealing with the world's worst arguably worst environmental disaster, definitely worst ocean disaster. And he basically said, we faced all the same challenges that the average researcher, the average collaborator in a multi-faceted, multi-organizational, increasingly complex, data-driven world is facing. We were on different networks. We were coming from different organizations. We needed data and tools to be able to share, communicate, collaborate, and innovate solutions to try to fix this situation with the well. But those are fundamental challenges that my colleagues and I face daily. And so my boss at the time said, can you go bigger? And at the time, we didn't know what that meant. As Pete and I both highlighted, I have a geology degree and pedigree straight up. But I started absorbing in information from my computing science, cyber, software design, systems analysis, different facets of what it's going to take to have a more scalable, adaptable, and communal resource for our research community that is evolved into what is today's EDX data infrastructure. And we're on a really important journey right now with our development team and our cyber and our IT folks to actually lift and shift it into a multi-cloud instance that'll allow it to scale further, but still, again, be responsible. There's always this great promise with technology, but there's also potholes and pitfalls that you can run into, ability for, malicious attacks and other things to impact it. We see increasingly cyber attacks on businesses, even small countries, increasingly big countries that are compromising their ability to perform. And we don't want EDX or any of our tools to be vulnerable to those types of things, but we still want to be able to unlock and tap into the power of data, advanced computing, and innovative, creative research minds from the science and engineering workforce, not just at the national labs, but with our collaborators in academia, nonprofits, the regulatory sector, and the commercial sector, so that we can meet the next generation of challenges that require data and models and predictions to be able to address them. And critical infrastructure is part of that. So it's this funny little self-fulfilling system by having the EDX system in place for the last 14 years. And it's still not picture perfect, but we actually have, through the Office of Fossil Energy Carbon Management and NETL, we've actually built out a data foundation that is allowing us, especially with many of the themes in the BIL and the IRA, with orphan wells, with environmental social justice, with energy transition to cleaner solutions, hydrogen, carbon storage, carbon capture. There are so many facets to that, and it all requires a foundation of data. And people are coming to the EDX platform and saying, can I find what I need here? The answer is not always yes, but more and more often it is. We have something that helps them move their goals forward, and they contribute things back in that eventually help somebody else move things forward. And that's the journey we've been on. And it's an infrastructure journey, but it's a virtual one.
Well, I'm gonna take some of that, and again, forgive me if you already have, but I just, because I love the logo in the back there. We're gonna come back to what SAMI is all about, folks. It's a Science-Based AI and Machine Learning Institute. I do dig that. There you go, Kelly Rose. There you go, folks. That's another thing to Google. Kelly, thank you for introducing data. And again, EDX isn't just, and maybe at one point it was a repository. It is a full-fledged framework platform. You know, Scott, let me come to you, right? People can go to, and I love this, the Maximus website says, we use decades of experience to design, develop, and deliver innovative and impactful health and human service programs. That's not the department, folks. That is in general, one of the 16 sectors. Yep. We are driven by a mission to strengthen communities and improve the lives of those we serve. That is the essence of the infrastructure law. And as Kelly pointed out, the Inflation Reduction Act. So folks, read those executive summaries. Scott, how have these pieces of legislation, in addition to the work you're on this journey with at NETL, raised for you this emphasis on data, or data with context being information, and it driving your strategic approach at Maximus?
Yeah, and actually I want to step just a bit higher level with the bipartisan infrastructure law. Like you, Pete, I sit on the weekends when I get time and read this stuff, and in my mind, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, I sort of bucket it into three areas that I've been able to rationalize in my head. And I think, you know, one area is all about hardening the infrastructure. And this seems pretty clear. You know, power outages, the bill says it was like $70 billion a year, right? We've got threats from geopolitical, rising gas prices. You know, we want to build these network of car chargers, but, you know, if we're investing in the future, we also need to sort of eliminate things like range anxiety. It's about making the right thing, the thing of the future, more ubiquitous. And then, you know, in that hardening the infrastructure is all of that cyber piece. And Charlie, I want to come back to you on the cyber piece, but I think of that as one major piece. And another major piece that I think is equally important for the long term of our nation is, as I distill that, I see thematics around quality and equity. And, you know, this is about everything from bringing high-speed internet to rural communities. There's some 20 or 30 million Americans are living in spaces that don't have high-speed internet. You know, when I was doing work in the healthcare space, we used to talk about social determinants of health, which really is, you know, it gets at the economic disparities of, you know, how individuals are afforded, have access to effective healthcare. And one of the things you boil it down to is one of the main determinants is your zip code. It is where you live. And right now, many of us are sitting comfortably in cities and towns with fantastic internet, but part of this bill is driving equality for fundamental infrastructure that we all need, whether it's water, whether it's building the highways and bridges. And Pete, I drove many times over that. I'm from Pittsburgh, that bridge that collapsed. And, you know, that is a clear indication that if we don't take action on these things, not only is it going to cause harm, but going back to the broadband, it is going to limit our future, our children's future. And then the third thing I'll say about this whole element of equity and quality is part of it is this new Justice 40 initiative, which, if I'm correct, I think it's the first time the government has said, hey, we're going to make it a goal that 40% of the benefits that the federal investment is going to go to is to flow to disadvantaged and marginalized communities. And this helps get at that economic disparity. So as I read all of that bill, I see things around hardening our infrastructure. I see what I just said about the equality and creating equity for all of us to have the fundamental elements in an infrastructure that is required to survive and thrive in the future ahead. And then last is, you know, what will tie into the EDX is it also is investing billions, and I can't remember how many billions, but billions into R&D, billions into investing our future, and billions of prioritization around multi-agency R&D, which Kelly, Charlie, Pete, we all know that one of the challenge isn't just in my agency doing research. It is, and this is why EDX is so powerful, it is how do we drive research across institutions? How do we drive it across agencies? How do we drive multi-agency, and by the way, private sector R&D. And so I think that's why those three pieces in my mind, that's how I'm sort of resonating that this funding and the bill that was passed this year is paramount. And there are so many areas that, you know, folks on this call and countless others that are working that can improve our nation as a result of this massive legislation.
So Scott, well said, and I mean articulated so well. Thank you for bringing in the equity component, highlighting Justice 40, something very important to every agency. Environmental justice, folks, sometimes you'll see something about energy justice, water justice.
Yep.
That is what we're talking about. And again, the power of data, if properly curated and aggregated and use anywhere, visualize. This is the power of EDX. So what a double whammy of two people building something, but also taking into account the opportunity to leverage the cloud and some of those things Kelly will get to, because technology underpins it all. And while security, cyber and physical and network issues, we're getting to Charlie on to paint a little bit of a picture of you got to be constantly mitigating risks, cybersecurity frameworks, risk management frameworks, trusted identities, you know, all that. There's a promise with technology to help us have more of that situational awareness. So we live longer, water's cleaner. Just again, for the audience, you can go to dhs.gov and Google critical infrastructure. These folks are talking about sectors, not agencies.
Right.
There are over 450 agencies in government that align with those sectors we as human beings depend on. And technologies like EDX, the Energy Data Exchange, is not just a fossil energy, NETL energy platform. It is something that everyone's using in a collaborative manner in a world that's now virtual to kind of have those light bulb moments. And Kelly, we'll talk a little bit, I hope, about sort of the future and what you're excited about moving forward. Charlie, let's do whatever you want, because even when you're talking about the scary Internet of Things, the IoT, there's the infrastructure law is there to say, look, we recognize it's at risk and it doesn't happen overnight. You don't go plug something in and you're instantly a super smart, secure power grid, but paint a picture of the holistic view of how to embrace innovation and also mitigate risk.
Yeah, no, well, certainly I don't want to be the wet blanket in this conversation here. I love being parts of conversations like this because, this is a positive news story, right? When you take a look at how the internet has evolved over, since the late 1950s, conceptually, its roots go all the way back to the 1950s. It is a great news story. I mean, human health, the human condition around the world is demonstrably better because of the adaptation and the adoption and evolution of technical systems, right? So fundamentally, this is a great news story. And I love the fact that both Kelly and Scott really drive that home because, yes, we're going to talk about some of the security challenges, but fundamentally, this is all about how do we as human beings take advantage of the most important benefits of technology and then try to be realistic about where there might be security concerns and how do we mitigate them. A lot of the work I do at the University of Maryland, and I'm the director of the Center for the Governance of Technology and Systems, where we look at the interplay between technology and human systems together, is to really create tools, practical tools that acknowledge the fundamental truth that, look, we are in this journey, this path for adoption of technology that's going to make all of our lives better. But we need to make sure that we do it in such a way that's more equitable and certainly more secure. So I really just wanted to reemphasize those first of all, those 2 points. Certainly there are security concerns. There are a range of threat actors. When we look at the threat landscape against critical infrastructure, both by sector and what are called national critical functions, that CISA has effectively advanced our thinking. So it used to be that we would talk only about the 16 critical infrastructure sectors. Now we talk about national critical functions. This idea that organizations do specific things and oftentimes they work together in tandem to produce whether it's to produce and distribute electricity or clean water, or provide rail transport or air transport, whatever the critical function is. And so the threat landscape to all of that is varied. It varies by which national critical function you're talking about. So not every sector, not every national critical function faces the same risks. Some are targeted more often than others by certain threat actor types. Some are targeted by nation states. Some are targeted by criminal organizations. And so the first thing you have to understand is that not everyone faces the same threat landscape. So understanding that is incredibly important. The next thing that's really important to understand is complexity. It's not it's not a situation where we can only think of security as, well, I've got this one computer over here that's running this one version of an operating system that's running, this stack of software. We have to understand that these technologies actually work together, oftentimes, dozens, if not, sometimes hundreds of systems that work in tandem together to provide the service, the human service that we come to depend on. And so if attackers understand that complexity and that kind of broader fabric, then I can attack specific systems and create cascading failures that generate these larger societal consequences. In fact, in some of the most consequential cyber attacks that we've seen, it's not the number of devices that were affected, it was the right device that was affected. And when they hit that right device, it creates those large cascading effects, whether it's the stopping of the movement of oil, or it's an impact on the distribution of electricity or clean water. And so understanding complexity in all this technology and how it supports the human systems is absolutely fundamental. And so, to give a practical example of that, one of the projects that I'm working at the center is attempting to map attack surfaces. Well, you might be thinking to yourself, well, attack surfaces, that's kind of a cyber 101 sort of activity, and you would be right. The challenge is if you are let's say, a state governor, understanding the broader attack surface across all 16 critical infrastructure sectors in your state is not something that is knowable right now. And so being able to piece together all these independent, often private organizations' attack surfaces together into a specific holistic view so that you can make better decisions about where potential vulnerabilities lie is a fundamental challenge for both the federal government as well as the state and local governments. And so one of the real challenges in cybersecurity, specifically cybersecurity of critical infrastructure, is understanding this holistic picture. And so we actually have an active research effort looking at that right now. So it's a good news story. There are some security challenges, but it is knowable, and it is there are ways in which we can adopt specific tools and processes to help mitigate the most consequential effects of cyber attacks. So I never like to paint this picture that we should just bury our heads in the sand, because that's just not true. I think there are plenty of things that we can do. And so overall, I'm excited about where we're going.
Well, Charlie, I love when you talk. I mean, the word cascade, powerful word, consequential, powerful word, complexity. That is what this world is we live in. And it can be applied, as I pivot back to Dr. Kelly Rose, and data, the volume, velocity, variety, veracity of it, getting our arms around it, leveraging the cloud. Kelly, I've seen you go from our talks 15 years ago about look at the cool subsurface analytics information and the cool charts to now we have to put it somewhere. And this is again going to come to you, Scott, as well, on now technology is underpinning the mission need, the requirements, and tapping into those right capabilities, mapping them. Charlie, to close out your segment there, you paint that picture of it's not simple. There's stuff we're never going to know. And don't let anybody come in and say, I have a silver bullet. There's always a new risk, there are vulnerabilities, and we have to do this thing continuously as we diagnose and analyze. So thank you for that. We'll come back around for some more great stuff from you. But Kelly, let's pivot to that discussion and the evolution of EDX and where you're going.
Well, I mean, EDX is an enabler, right? It's data infrastructure. It's an ecosystem that enables. And I loved Scott's point that Charlie picked up on as well. You know, it's democratization of capability. And historically, one of the things that has really made the DOE National Labs unique and special was the huge advanced cluster computing, high performance computing clusters they had on-prem. What we've seen in the last decade is the tech sector has adopted those technologies, a very natural outcome of government research facilities like DOE, DOD, and others, moving these into the commercial sector. They've taken them in ways and directions that are benefiting the public even now. This podcast is an example, but that's what we're trying to do with EDX. Is we're basically saying this is something that's been born out of innovation at one of the nation's national labs, and you know, with coordination and collaboration with headquarters and so many amazing folks. But the goal of EDX has always been to put the power of data in the hands of the many in a responsible way. It has a public and a private side, it always has, but there's a huge treasure trove of resources on the public side. But to Scott's point, if you don't have the right broadband or the right compute resources, your ability to connect to that capability is still fairly limited. So IRA and BIL are hitting so many facets that are important to that democratization of data related innovation and advanced capability. And in this instance, relative to EDX in our mission space, you know, we're waiting on the folks that are handling that broadband build out to bring that capability and democratize its access, that critical infrastructure as a foundational capability to the many. But then they will be able to connect to EDX. EDX is in this instantiation that's being built out with BIL funding in the cloud. We'll still connect to our on-prem advanced compute, but also we'll put the hands of advanced compute capabilities available to the many through cloud providers in the commercial sector, and the treasure trove of data sets that we have been curating and aggregating in EDX, as well as some of the advanced algorithms and tools that we've been developing to make those data more findable, reusable, interoperable, so that, you know, everyone has a slightly different thing that they want to do with it. Charlie talked about risk in his introductory remarks. There's a lot of risk analysis, you know, infrastructure planning, supply chain, analytics, everything that you can think of is that's data driven. The hope is that people will be able to access, find, connect to the resources in EDX, but also then take it into their own use cases from a small business in one of our less urban areas that maybe doesn't have immediate access to a national lab, which is not just a small business, but just as an example. They can do this type of thing now from their home office, or, you know, their community center and library, potentially doing innovation for small business innovation in something that impacts their local community, or possibly even a broader need. But that's what we're working towards in this build out with EDX, is how to democratize connection to the resources that we've been curating responsibly, make them more findable and reusable, and also connecting them to compute resources that other entities may have at their disposal, and make it more user-friendly for folks to do more with this resource.
Okay, that was amazing. Well, Scott, I'm coming right to you because I have to, you know, you talk about app development and governance and secure clouds and things. Please comment on that. Let me just, because it's on the moment. Kelly.
Yeah, so let me do that and just put another plug in for you, Kelly. Her vision behind this, and Maximus has had the chance to work on this for a little bit, but you hear Kelly talk about creating the data warehouse and publishing it and curating it in a shared environment, applying AI and ML, right? Building workflows, making sure it is a secured platform from a cyber perspective, right? Applying all of these new technologies and advancements. So she is taking the best of what we know how to do in technology, but it is all for to expand and enhance the government's ability and industry's ability to do research. And Kelly had drawn and shown for me this diagram of two pyramids. And if you think, I'm probably giving a horrible analogy here, but the top of the historical research pyramid is like this. 80% of it is finding and curating data, right? The bulk of a researcher's time is just finding, discovering that data. And the paradigm that EDX is going for is EDX will do that for you. So now that we have researchers doing the analysis and inform, you're able to take historical and longitudinal studies and build on them. So why I think this is such a great use case. I mean, behind, beyond just the passion of Kelly and for all the right reasons this started, it is the smart application of innovative technologies to really solve fundamental challenges facing our nation, specifically around our critical infrastructure. So I just wanted to add that there, but it's that paradigm shift that if we can, automate and inform and allow our scientists and our researchers to spend more time collaborating in doing that analysis, that's when the results really shoot up.
So amen to all that. And I think you covered most of what I was hoping you'd cover. I was about to say, Kelly, the left bone's connected to that song when you're talking about what's connected to and it has nothing to do with the fact that I like to say I connect dots and build bridges. But we're in a world now where broadband is critical. Spectrum is critical. Right sizing an organization and knowing your risk posture is critical to be able to do what Maximus and NETL and the School of Public Policy are telling us, and that's to do analysis and make sense of it, of data. So Scott, if you can expound a little more, because I do want to hear this, and then we're going to go into something that just came to me, and I think you all can speak to this. Oh, sorry about that bump there. Workforce development. You're all teaching.
Yeah, let me
tee that up.
Yeah, let me give a couple more examples, because it does come back to the data, right? I mean, in cyber, it's protecting the data. When you're talking about the curation, it's all about the data. For another one of our critical infrastructure clients in the EPA, we're helping them use data as a force multiplier, not by just sort of operationalizing the data to support decision-making, but again, through the same disciplines we just talked about, providing and empowering the scientific community to be able to use that data. We're migrating to the cloud so that we can create secure multi-cloud environments to be able to share research, to be able to have analytics on the edge. So all of these things that we're doing, it really is about the smart application of the technology to solve some of these fundamental, and I call it sort of, center mass mission problems. And so it is what drives us, right? You hear it in the excitement in all three of our voices. It's about, taking what is going to come forward, it is coming forward in the critical infrastructure, and how do we protect these 16, elements of the critical infrastructure and drive that forward. So
thank you. And you hit it. I mean, I've heard you speak and lecture on application development. You mentioned just recently about the zero trust world we live in and the dependence on edge devices, and there is no perimeter. I mean, that struck with me, Scott. And it speaks to Charlie's points about, hey, there's always going to be new threats, but we have to address it and do our best to mitigate, because the bad guy and gal are going to figure out somebody's not paying attention to the legislation. So kudos to you, of course. And Kelly, this keeps coming back as I move into this workforce piece, the tool you've built and its evolution, big time high five for continuously telling people about it and keep doing it, because I think it's hidden in plain view. My 2 cents. Charlie, Kelly, and Scott, I have to add this into this discussion because you each are in environments, whether it's business or in the classroom, teaching. We always talk about the next generation. I mean, look, this infrastructure law is going to hopefully extend life and physical infrastructure for years, and our children and our children's children. Can you talk about how you are taking your messages to enhance that workforce? Because data as a strategic asset, IT modernization, customer experience, these are all tenets, principles the government and industry are saying, yeah, we do that. But workforce development, reskilling, retaining, and recruiting talent. Is it hard? Are you seeing something that gives you hope? Charlie, Kelly, then Scott.
Yeah, so the way that we approach it at the university is really first and foremost about building a community that blends not just students and faculty, kind of the traditional academic community, but more importantly, being able to reach out to the private sector and to government to be able to create, effectively this integrated community of certainly, younger students who, are interested in moving into this space, but to be able to provide real world insights, into some of the academic frameworks that we're trying to train our students with. The reason that becomes important to have that community is that the way that we end up communicating and teaching is changing. Yes, we still have kind of the traditional classroom model, but we also have, kind of massively online, delivered courses, the so-called MOOCs. We have a lot of, kind of bite-sized, 10-minute little online, lectures for not for credit that allow us to, put out basically a virtual library of a range of different subjects from real experts, from, traditional academics, but also the private sector and government. All of this becomes exceptionally important when you mix it with other forms of media, including traditional research reports, center level reports, such as what we're doing, because it allows me to go from something that's kind of vague, kind of very high level, down to very practical examples of what we mean. So, for example, one of the case studies that we always explore with my students and my graduate students are threats to the electrical sector from cyber attacks. And traditionally, this is thought of, kind of what we saw in the Ukraine, where the Russians go after SCADA infrastructure. But what they always fail to understand is that there's at least one other example of attacks on that sector that really don't get as much play, and that's the attack out in South Africa, where criminal organizations actually gain access to the billing server, and because they manipulated the billing records, effectively, encrypted them, it actually caused, because everyone has to prepay for electricity down in Johannesburg, actually created rolling blackouts because people couldn't pay up their accounts. That is a perfect example of how better data and being able to analyze the whole set of risks actually provides a material impact on the well-being of those citizens, right? So being able to pull out those real-world examples in this larger community that we've constructed does a much better job of kind of informing and educating going forward.
Thank you for the enlightening moment and the for example, and for just in this discussion here, making it real and humanizing how technology is helping, in this case, a community in another part of the world. And that's, to this point of Scott, the word ubiquitously connected, device connected, information at our fingertips. Sometimes it's, well, how do I consume it and make sense of it? So Kelly, talk a little bit about that workforce development component of EDX that's so amazing.
Well, I think fundamentally EDX is a platform that allows people to learn, to use, to grow, to innovate. So there's a multifaceted. We often think about workforce development relative to folks that are early in their career coming out of school, but there's so much transition going on. Our society on multiple levels, it's not just in the energy sector. There's this need for folks to reinvent themselves at least once or twice in their career, more and more often. Not everywhere, but it's more and more common. And I think, from a workforce development perspective, again, that democratization of being able to interact with an advanced data infrastructure system that has got energy, environmental, societal, justice related capabilities, components, and content already in it, it gives them something on the public side to play in, to learn from. it is daunting. I mean, as we've noted earlier in this dialogue, my degrees, my training, I'm an example of this, is in geology, the discipline of geology and earth science. But I've had to learn the language and grow my knowledge base in so many other arenas over aspects of my career, so I can communicate and I can collaborate, so I can execute the mission space that I've been tasked or given the opportunity to embark upon. And it takes a little bit of curiosity, and that's what EDX offers. It offers people that are curious, that are interested in growing into a new domain, the opportunity to interact with data and tools, and increasingly capabilities that will allow them to grow and figure out what they might be interested in doing. So it has that innovation piece to it that allows folks that are already in this sector to use those tools and use those resources for advanced applications. But it can also be used on the educational front, whether that's self-education or through university. We've had university partners in the past that have asked, can we use this? And we're like, yep, if it's out there on the public side, it's available. I also just wanted to comment really briefly. One of the things that comes up, SAMI, which is the logo over that shoulder, sorry, the mirroring, is a new endeavor out of NETL. It's our Science-Based AI/ML Institute, and its entire mission is to responsibly and efficiently help our workforce here at the lab be more effective in their AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning applications, which are almost always data-driven. There are some rare exceptions. And part of that is workforce development and training. It's helping people be responsible and also understand that while data and technology and artificial intelligence, we hear in the media all the time, it pops up constantly. AI is now able to automatically write some student's essay or create art that the great masters of the world have created. It's not going to replace the need for human expertise. It's a tool. It has to be used responsibly. It can also be used irresponsibly. We have to be able to differentiate between what's real and what's a deep fake. We have to know how to use these tools. And that's where, again, if you have an expertise, a point of view, you're an economist, you're an engineer, you're a technician coming out of the power generation sector, and you want to get into something that is data-driven analytics, data-driven science, this is the type of playground, the type of capability and tool that offers you that ability to start to grow those resources, along with more traditional capabilities available through online learning, and university programs. Community colleges are huge, but it's a tool in that toolkit, and that can help the workforce continue to evolve, whether it's advanced or making a career shift or early career.
I love it. And Scott, I have to jump in. I mean, this thing is, I can hear it in both of the voices. I know Scott's eager to get there. This is the responsibility. EDX is a tool. It's a sandbox. It's a playground. But it's helping people who don't have access to a national lab, or maybe don't have a master's or PhD, go online and do something with the data that somebody else isn't doing. And I find that to be the spirit of why every administration in this country emphasizes in its IT agenda workforce development. Scott.
Yeah, I can boil it down to three things for you, Pete, from the workforce development. First of all, I'm looking for technologists. But more than that, I'm looking for people who are consultative, who have an innovative mindset and mission-oriented. So that's the who I'm looking for. The how is we look at university of partnerships in research institutes to bring in that research element. Charlie and I are talking about how to launch some partnerships coming up in the very near future. And then the last piece, and I think it is the most important piece, because often we get hired by the IT shop to sort of build or work on these systems. The first thing I say is, I need to talk to the mission owner. I need to talk to the clients, the men and women who are responsible for this mission. That's the problem we're solving. The technology may be the means, but never, never, never forgetting that we're there to support our client's mission. So that's that is the first foundational piece to always start with.
Amen. And look, that doesn't count because we're now going into our 30 seconds or less parting shots, because those were amazing. And I appreciate that. I feel it. And Charlie, I didn't say it earlier. Thank you for the audience. Critical infrastructure, everybody's talked about 16 sectors. There are, I think it's 54 or 55 functions that speak to what Scott just pointed out in terms of mission, that if you, I talk facts, tell, stories, sell. If you're selling into the government, it's not about buying and selling, it's seeking and solving. And this is how you can learn about mission. And it clearly is in the Maximus DNA there. Charlie, Kelly, and Scott in that order. And then I'll close it out. A parting shot. What do you hope you left with the audience based on what you know and what you heard today?
Well, I hope people understand that underneath, all the nation's critical infrastructure, what you're really talking about is the interface between technology and human systems. This integration, this complexity that is developed has to be understood not only for benefiting all the great things that we've designed it to do, but also to understand the consequences of potential threats and the threat landscape affecting it. So that's my 2 cents in this space, and I hope that's what people are able to start to discern in this landscape.
Thank you, Charlie. Kelly?
Critical infrastructure, like we said, it spans the things that we physically see, our roadways, the potholes, the bridges, et cetera, but it also is increasingly encompassing the virtual, the broadband platforms like EDX. And even in the commercial sector, regulatory sectors, we're seeing more and more requirement of workforce to be able to interact with digital data infrastructure to make decisions, to record what's going on, to help track and identify patterns for maintenance, for risk prevention, failure prevention, et cetera. So no matter what you're doing in your career path, in your education path, if you stay curious, if you lean into the use of these types of technologies appropriate to where you are in your work environment and in your comfort zone, the opportunity to be impactful even within your sphere of influence, no matter how big or small it may feel or appear, is significant. EDX would not be the data infrastructure platform it is today without the literally dozens of people behind the scenes that I have had the opportunity and true honor to work with. It would not happen. I can't build that by myself. No one can. It takes a village, as Pete likes to say, and that's true for this type of data infrastructure, critical infrastructure transition and evolution that we're going down. The BIL and IRA are basically there to accelerate this transition to meet current demand and current needs. But it's opening up an opportunity for people across our nation going forward and in all their different spheres of influence that is just, I think, really, really exciting and offers just a huge amount of opportunity. So
Well said, Kelly, as always, so eloquent. Scott Barr.
Well, it's a pleasure to share a virtual stage with all of you. My parting shot is, look, Maximus is proud to be an integral part of driving data and technology innovations to really address and dig in and help solve some of our nation's critical infrastructure challenges. I said it before, we put mission at the center, and then to the extent that we can be there working with our clients on these missions, I think what's come out of the infrastructure law is a pathway for all of us to make a greater good for the nation, and I know we can do it today.
Amen. Thank you for your humility, your curiosity, your authenticity. I'm blessed to know each of you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you for your time, and for everybody who tuned into the Thought Leadership Consortium. Have a great day.